Let's use our imagination and think. Adolf Hitler is sitting in his Berlin bunker, trembling uncontrollably with fear. On the other side of the fortified door, he hears the screams of his soldiers, who are being shot by the bloodthirsty Soviet troops who have captured the city. There is no way out, and he cannot commit suicide, since his cyanide capsules and firearms were mistakenly left in the main room of the bunker when he was rushed to a safe room. Hitler notices that the battle behind the reinforced steel hatch has become eerily quiet. He puts his ear to the cold metal and listens. He can only make out a series of voices that seem to speak Russian. Listening more closely, he hears a ticking sound. It's like there's a clock on the other side of the door counting down to something. His eyes open wide. He dives to the far end of the room and looks for cover. A moment later, an explosion is heard. The door groans and falls to the floor with a thud. After that, dozens of armed Soviet soldiers enter the cell. They find Adolf Hitler lying on the floor. They successfully caught the monster that caused so much pain and death around the world. The question is what to do with it now. There are 3 different scenarios that could have unfolded if Hitler had been captured during World War II, based on when this event occurred. It is important to note that it is actually impossible to know what would have happened if the Allies had captured Hitler, but based on historical documents and statements by leaders of that time, we can make some educated guesses. First scenario: what if Hitler was captured by Allied forces at the end of World War II? Adolf Hitler is now in the hands of the Soviet troops. Over the past few months, they have waged a brutal campaign to oust Nazi troops from their homeland and have now moved the fight to Germany. They ravaged the countryside, slowly making their way to Berlin. Entire cities were burned to the ground, naval facilities were looted, and airfields were confiscated. But it is the stories about what the Red Army is doing to German citizens and Nazi sympathizers that instill fear in the region. After the siege of their homeland, the Soviets do not take prisoners, and torture is a common thing. When this happened, Hitler could not believe what his generals were telling him. His troops were defeated on all fronts. It seemed that there was no longer any hope of turning the war around, but he ordered his men to continue fighting anyway. He would rather sacrifice every soldier in Germany than voluntarily surrender to the Allied forces. From his bunker, Hitler worked with his advisors to find some way out of their predicament. But when the Soviets broke through their defenses, Hitler considered suicide. Due to a number of unfortunate circumstances, Adolf Hitler is now in the hands of Red Army soldiers. They pull him out of the bunker, and thousands of soldiers want to kill him there. They shower curses on the monster who unleashed the Second World War, because his actions lead to the death of millions. The soldiers spit on him when he passes by. These people have seen the worst of the worst, and now they want revenge. When Nazi troops invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, they committed countless atrocities. The Soviets resisted, but lost more people than any other country during World War II. The Soviet lands are soaked in blood, and its soldiers hate Adolf Hitler with a fiery passion. The Nazi leader is taken to an open square, where he is forced to kneel. The Soviet man rejoices looking at the helpless Hitler. Joseph Stalin gave clear instructions to his men that if they captured Hitler, he should be sent back to Moscow to stand trial for his crimes, but this is not happening. Overcome with rage, the soldiers cannot control themselves. Adolf Hitler is begging for mercy in the city square, and the voices of Soviet people echo from the roar and crumbling buildings that surround them. One of the soldiers who pulled Hitler out of the bunker comes out of the crowd and silently approaches him. He looks Adolf Hitler in the eye and says something in broken German. "This is for my fallen comrades," says a Soviet soldier. He pulls his pistol out of the side holster, pulls the trigger back and shoots Adolf Hitler in the head, instantly killing him. There is a roar of approval from the crowd. They will all be reprimanded by Stalin, but the soldiers will be united in what they have done. The demon that was Adolf Hitler was too dangerous to let him live, and he deserved what he got. Other members of the Red Army approach Hitler's body and shoot him. By the end of the day, there is very little that can be restored and disposed of. Second scenario: what if Hitler was captured by Allied forces in the middle of World War II? A small group of elite Allied soldiers is hiding in the dense trees of the German forest. The sound of an engine is heard in the distance. The Allies received information that Adolf Hitler would travel along this secluded road today with only a small retinue of guards. The team was airlifted the previous night and is now waiting to ambush the jeep in which the Führer is. A Nazi car is climbing a hill. There are 4 men in it. Their targets are in the back. The Allied commander gives the signal, and the soldiers prepare. When a jeep passes by their position, they shoot through the tires. The car goes out of control and crashes into a tree on the side of the road. Allied soldiers jump out of the foliage and open fire on the people in front of the jeep. Their bullets shatter the windshield and tear apart the Nazis in the front seats of the car. The general sitting next to Hitler raises his machine gun and returns fire. Allied soldiers dive for cover. From one of the treetops, a sniper looks into his optical sight. He holds his breath and pulls the trigger. The head of a Nazi general explodes when a bullet from his rifle passes through the skull of a German. Adolf Hitler reaches for his gun. He pulls it out of its holster. Before he can turn around to aim, a machine gun is pressed against his skull. "Drop it or you'll die," the Allied commander hisses. Hitler lets go of the gun. It clanks to the floor of the jeep. Allied soldiers pull the Führer out of the jeep and gag him. A special forces unit carefully makes its way through enemy territory. They must act quickly, as it will not be long before the Nazis realize that their leader has been kidnapped. A group of soldiers and their prisoner reach the Nazi Air Force base. It's risky to try to hijack a plane while carrying the most wanted person in the world with you, but this is the only way out. Men are waiting for a shift change. When the time comes, they run to one of the planes furthest from the watchtower. They throw Hitler into the cargo hold. The commander knocks out the Führer with the butt of his pistol, while 2 men climb into the cockpit. They start the engines and move towards the runway. In the confusion, the Nazis are trying to determine who is taking the plane on an unauthorized flight. It does not even occur to them that it is the Allied soldiers who hijacked the plane with Hitler on board. The plane takes off, and the Nazis finally realize that something is terribly wrong. They open fire on the hijacked plane, but the Allies are already out of range. They fly across the North Sea and land in the UK. Adolf Hitler is imprisoned, and the British inform the world that the monster who unleashed the Second World War has now been captured. However, this does not necessarily lead to a happy ending. The capture of Hitler in the midst of World War II was the best scenario for Germany. Because Hitler's attack on the Soviet government was not considered right by his generals. Since Hitler was no longer there, the German army, returning from this mistake, would have concentrated all its forces in one place together with its new leaders. By concentrating their forces on one front at a time, the Nazis can secure victory in Europe and move on to the next stage of the war. Third scenario: what if Hitler was captured by Allied forces at the beginning of World War II? The Nazi Party came to power. Adolf Hitler is now the Führer of Germany, and he has plans to take over the world by committing mass genocide. Britain and France are watching with disbelief as German troops enter Poland. They understand that there is no time to fool around. This new German leader must be stopped at all costs. Britain and France will not tolerate the aggressive nature of the new German Führer. They immediately send troops to Poland to push the Nazis back. It is now the beginning of 1939, and the German armed forces are growing, but not yet strong enough to withstand the combined might of France, Great Britain, and the Nordic countries. The Allied forces are pushing the Germans back. They warn Italy that if they intervene, they will not hesitate to send troops into their country. The United States is closely monitoring the situation, and although it initially decided to adhere to an isolationist policy, it is convinced that Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany pose too great a threat to stability in the world to be left alone. In the USA, he decides to help the European Allied forces in their quest to stop the mad dictator. With decisive actions, Hitler does not have time to unite the whole of Germany behind his back. Many of its tanks, aircraft, and naval vessels are still under construction. Allied troops are guarding the borders surrounding Germany to make sure the Nazis cannot expand beyond the country. Then they approach Berlin from all sides. As soon as the Allies reach the city, they place Adolf Hitler under arrest. There is a puppet government created to oversee the restructuring of Germany. Any supporters of Nazism are quickly detained and tried for their unprovoked attack on Poland. As Allied intelligence penetrates deeper into the infrastructure of the Nazi Party, they discover a number of disturbing discoveries. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis have already begun to round up Jewish families and send them to concentration camps in the region. The Allies cannot believe what the Nazis were planning. They immediately begin to try Hitler and other members of the Nazi Party for crimes against humanity and sentence them one by one. The original plan was to exile the Nazi leadership to a remote island where they could not harm anyone but themselves. It would be similar to what was done to Napoleon, but after seeing the genocidal tendencies of the Nazi Party, the Allied leaders decide that Adolf Hitler cannot be left alive. He still has supporters all over Germany and in other parts of the world. It was decided that the war crimes committed during the initial invasion of Poland were sufficient to sentence Adolf Hitler to death. He was hanged for almost dragging the whole world into a new war. His closest allies are also tried and hanged, while many other Nazis are imprisoned for the rest of their lives. The capture of Hitler at the beginning of World War II would be the best scenario. But, unfortunately, this did not happen. And each of us is well aware of the consequences and losses that the Second World War brought to the world. In this video, we told you in detail what if the Allies had captured Hitler alive during World War II. Don't forget to write your thoughts about other scenarios if Hitler was caught alive in the comments. Dear viewers, if you liked the video, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. This step will help us create and improve more interesting videos. See you in the next video.